Hi, this is Tim Belcher. Welcome back to the channel. In my last video, I made some wristbands as sort of a tribute to my dad. If you haven't seen that video, I'm very proud of it. I hope you watch it after this one. But while I was making those wristbands, I was making one for a friend's daughter who isn't into the typical girly things that some teenagers are into. She's more into Dungeons and Dragons. And I made her a fairly cool, what I thought was a fairly cool wristband with her name on it, with a dungeon background. And when I went to finish it, it smeared a little bit. For a second I was upset that it smeared a little bit, and then I looked at it and thought, wow, that really looks like a tattoo. And that got me thinking, I wonder what I could do with the Cricut in drawing on leather. So over the last several days, I've gone sort of crazy drawing on leather. There's quite a few samples here. I'm trying to figure out how to draw on the leather with accuracy, with color, and then trying to figure out how to finish and seal it without that color smearing, and I think I found a way. So this is pen drawing on leather. This is how I made it. Before we get too far into the finish phase, there is some nuance when drawing with the Cricut. And the first thing you should know is that when you're drawing, you're actually doing a line drawing. You're not filling in any color. So for instance, when I bring in this dragon and select draw, it's going to convert that into an outline of that image. And if I import an image with thin lines, such as this example text, when I convert those lines in the Cricut design space, it will create double lines. It will create an outline of each of the lines you have. The only way I found to get around that double line issue is by using either a CAD program or a graphics package that can export directly to DXF. This is an example I created directly from SketchUp. For the most part, the double lines work in your favor on leather, though. They make the lines darker and a bit wider. Now back to my dragon example to show you my process. I'll take an image like this dragon and I'll run it through Image Vectorizer. That's an inexpensive application on the Mac that transforms that image into vectors. I'll then save that as an EPS and bring that file into my graphics package, which is Affinity Designer. And that's another inexpensive application that is similar to Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape. And what you see me doing here is selecting parts of that image that I would want to be filled in more. And for those parts, I'm creating offsets inside, or additional lines inside those components. And that way, when the Cricut goes to draw those lines, it's going to draw additional internal lines or create what looks like a partial fill. And here's just another example of filling in some additional lines inside some sample text. And I thought I would walk you start to finish for just a minute through my process in creating these wristbands. I've drawn the pattern of my wristband and then offset inward about 1/16 of an inch. And then I use that to create a layer mask for that large gear background image, something to create a design across the entire piece. And then I just overlaid an outlined white circle that will hold my logo, which I made in a similar fashion. Now into the design space for Cricut, I've pulled in the cut path for my wristband, and now I'm centering that background image on it. I'm going to group those together. Then I'm going to import the two components of my logo, the black background and what will be the red text. I'm going to center those, rotate them, and center them on the piece. I'll then group and attach them, and that's the project. Now let's talk about finishing. I showed you earlier an image of that bracelet I made for my friend's daughter and the blur, so let's do that in real time here. This was an earlier test of some dragon tattoo art, and I'm using a cotton rag to put some alcohol-based leather dye on it, and you can see the clarity and the definition fade a little bit. It does look very much like a tattoo. Next, I'm going to try some natural leather finish on an undyed piece of leather after the draw. This is a natural wax-based product called Toconol. I have no idea how you actually pronounce that. And this is fascinating to me. As I'm using this, you can actually see the black fade to blue. And I still don't know why this happens. It happens most predominantly with black ink. And I thought at the time maybe it was exacerbated by applying it by hand. And so at this point I knew that applying by hand and rubbing it in was causing a problem. So it was time to test my airbrush. And here I'm using the airbrush to apply a dye to a test piece. And I actually found applying leather dye out of an airbrush gives me a much more consistent and uniform application. And here, back to another one of those test pieces with the dragon tattoo art. And here I'm getting a little bit fancy. I'm going to use that leather dye to fade into the center, which I thought turned out very, very well. So next I wanted to try the airbrush at applying an acrylic-based top coat. And like before, I wanted to try it first on natural leather, undyed, to see what effect it had on the colors. And just like the Toconol, you can actually see this in real time lose the black and turn blue. The red is not affected at all, but certainly the black was. So I moved on to trying it on one of the test pieces I had previously dyed with the airbrush. And here you can see that dye somehow locked in that color. So now, putting together everything I've learned, I'm going to take the last two pieces that I like the most, this Star Wars wristband, and then one final test piece with my logo, and I'm going to apply leather dye. The Star Wars I did a standard full coat, and on this one I really took my time to create that fade again, and I really like the results of this one the most. Now I'm going to come back over it with that acrylic-based top coat. And that seems to be the key. At least a light coat of leather dye and an acrylic top coat applied with an airbrush. I'm going to glue on a piece of suede backing, again cut on the Cricut using that exact same cut line I did for the front. I'm going to add some snaps, and we're going to call this project done. If you like this content, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really is the single biggest thing you can do to help a small YouTube channel. And as always, thanks for watching.